Hello students, welcome to La Excellence. Welcome to the second session on economic survey. We saw the first chapter. Now let us begin quickly with the second chapter and see which points are important and how to look at different questions that can come from the economic survey, right? So if we take the first page, in the first page 2.1 actually talks about pre-1990, how India was actually functioning in the socialist era. So if you want to know about the socialism where we are focusing about nationalism and protectionism, this is back now mainly with respect to the Trump era. And then they talk about the Washington Consensus where the focus was on open trade, open capital and reliance on the private sector, which we see post 1990. These are some facts which may help you to write about any economy based essays. In the next page, they actually talk about the three most important bills or acts that were actually cleared by the parliament. That is, one is the Aadhaar bill, the bankruptcy code and the GST constitutional amendment. In economy sessions, please try to read about these three carefully. Whenever it is about Aadhaar card, please read it with respect to JAM, Trinity, DBT. What is the benefit of this? What were the disadvantages that were there because of improper redistribution in the society? How DBT will eliminate it? Then you have to look at the bankruptcy code, which is considered to be one important measure to reduce NPAs as much as possible. Then we have to look at the GST, which actually helps in increasing the GDP and creating one economic nation, right? So these points are important. Please try to see them carefully once. Then in 2.4, they actually talk about trade to GDP ratios, where they say that based on the size, we usually see that whether international trade is more or trade is less, it depends upon the size of the countries. Countries like Sri Lanka, which are much smaller, they trade more. Singapore trade more outside when compared to inside. In India, we see that there is trade within India and there is trade outside India as well. But within India, it's more when compared to outside India. That is true for almost all the major economies, right? So here, they actually talk about different things that are happening in different parts of the world. You have to focus about trade to GDP ratio, means it is international trade, not the domestic trade, which is actually included here. Then in this paragraph, they actually talk about India's trade is much higher when compared to its size. That is, if we take India, internal trade of India is much lesser when compared to the size of India. We will be reading about this in detail in further chapters where they talk about the internal trade convergence that is happening in India, and the focus there is to say what is the takeaway for us from the entire arguments in this chapter or in further chapters is simple. If a country is of bigger size, usually its internal trade should be more than its external trade. Unfortunately, in India, the internal trade is more than external trade, but it is not as high as it should have been when we look at the size of the country. So this is what you need to remember. There is a possibility that these kind of points can come in statement format in the exam. That is the reason why I am stressing on this, because if a significant chapter is present on a particular issue where they are focusing on that in some 10 to 12 pages, and in different chapters if they are talking about the same issue, high possibility that those questions can be picked in the exam. That is the reason I have just not showed you which lines are important. I am trying to tell you how it can come so that you understand the relevance of it. And another important thing I want you to know is, guys, why we are not giving summary and explaining you is that if I gave you summary, there is a tendency that you make summary out of that and you leave most of the important points which may be required from the exam point of view. So please, to avoid this summary from the summary, have the book itself and mark, so that whenever you look at this page, these points are important for you, right? So next, please see page number 45. In page 45, what is important for us is with respect to inhibiting service delivery and the weakness of the state capacity has created the problem. That is, one of the major problem for service delivery is this. One, when we talk about the auctions that are actually taking place post the 2G spectrum scam, now there is increased transparency and all, but still there is a lot of confusion about the public policy. There is a lot of trust deficit. So, a lot of consciousness or cautious effort is required in actually framing any policies of this sort. And on the other hand, they also talk about bureaucrats are now scared of taking any decisions. In governance, we come across this new public management where bureaucrats has to be in a position to take decisions at specific time based on the specific informations that they get. But unfortunately, because of the fear that in future they may be caught for wrong decisions, the bureaucrats are not in a position to take any decision. Here it talks about fear of 4 C's: courts, CVC, CBI and CAG. This is also creating a lot of problem even for the banking officials to actually write off loans, because they may be under pressure that why did you write off loan of a particular company? Did you receive any kickbacks? So these type of debates are also dangerous for these people. So they are a bit skeptic about these type of issues. So in governance, when they talk about the inefficiency in public service delivery, these points will be very, very important. You may get the question in ethics as well, where they are actually talking about why bureaucrats are not taking strict decisions nowadays, right? In those areas, this becomes important for us. Next is actually about the inefficient redistribution which we usually observe here. When we talk about inefficient redistribution, I told you that in India, there are some states and some districts where poor people are less, and there are some districts where poor people are more. But as funds are distributed equally to all of these people, we have a problem in this region. What is this problem? The problem is that districts where poor people are more, they are receiving less money, and the districts where poor people are less are receiving more money. Because of this, there are 3 major problems. That is, in areas where poor people are present more, there is exclusion errors, and where poor people are present less, inclusion errors, and in both places there are leakages. So this points you have to write whenever you are talking about the DBT, Aadhaar and all, why it is beneficial. You need to talk about these points. In this chapter, they actually try to explain this 3 points in detail, not required much, right? So let's move to next chapter. In this chapter, these points are more than enough. So let's take the next chapter, that is demonetization, to defy or demonize. Here, as I told you in the beginning itself, the focus is about what is the impact of demonetization on the economy. They talk about the short-term problems and long-term benefits. As short-term problems are not clear, I'll be showing you some points. If you can write about it, it's more than enough. So they actually argue that by withdrawing high currency values, we usually observe that we have effectively curbed corruption and also other major issues that were present. The reason or the justification the economic survey gives is, they talk with respect to the soil rates of the notes. That is, the 500s and thousands, if they were circulated more, then their soil rate would have been more. But if we look at 500 and 1000 notes of India and high value currencies of other countries, then the soil rates are usually less, which shows that high denomination notes were actually used only to store and not for any other purposes. This is one thing that we come to know with respect to demonetization. Then they say if there is more cash, that it means there will be more corruption and it will be used for a lot of illegal activities than the legal activities. This type of debates are usually made in the book. There is no need to go about all these. We need to look from the exam point of view. So let us see, the decision is already taken, so the impact is important for us. So let us see what are some of the things. First, the aim of this was fourfold. They say it was to curb corruption, then counterfeiting, the use of high denomination notes for terrorist activities, especially accumulation of black money. So these were the four major reasons which led to demonetization in the country. This is the background in which demonetization decision was taken by the government according to economic survey. So in the next page, we actually see that there is something called as helicopter drops. That is, in developed countries after global financial crisis, they went for more funding, more money was released into the market. And the main ambition there was to increase spending of the people to create demand, where it was called as helicopter drop of money. With demonetization, it is called as reverse helicopter drop or helicopter hoover. So this is important, just try to look at the terms once, nothing much, right? So let's move on quickly. Then see page number 60. Where they actually talk about impact of demonetization. One is short term, another one is likely long term effect. If you read this, no need to read whatever had happened before, and these are very simple things which are explained. Very rare possibility you get a question, but still if you read it carefully once, it may be helpful in your answer writing. It is there in the next page as well, where you will be talking about the impact on black money, real estate, GDP, tax collection, all this, right? So next, let's see some of the benefits. This is more important. One is tax on black money. As there is tax on black money, there will be more taxation or more money will be available for the government. So one benefit of this is declare their unaccounted wealth and pay taxes at the penalty rate, continue to hide it, not converting their old notes so that 100% will be there with the government itself, they can print new notes and use it, launder their black money, paying a cost for converting the money into white. So these are some of the problems which people will face if they are actually going for conversion of black money into white money. So these are the benefits that the state will be getting in terms of tax. And then you know that few schemes have been launched specifically to attract the investments from the black money into the government bonds. So all this are important for you. So in the next page you can actually see Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, where if you declare, some part of it will go to the government and some part will be invested in this, which will also help in upliftment of the poor. Then tax compliance will increase. You might have come across lot of companies and institutions now. They are digitalizing the economy and all the transactions are going through banking system. Once it becomes formal, all this will be part of the economy and then it increases GDP automatically. Tax compliance will usually increase because of the fear of accumulating black money. Then tax on informal savings, that is the savings will come into the banking system where people will generate some interest and again there will be tax on this savings as well. So these are some of the benefits which they usually see with respect to this. Then we have to talk about long-term benefits in terms of digitalization. I hope this is clear. Digitalization is the most important concept that we will be reading in this particular chapter. Digitalization, where we need to focus on 3.42 and 3.43, where they talk about the benefits that is going to happen, who will be the people who will be facing the problem. They talk about the poor who are largely outside the digital economy, the less affluent who are becoming part of the digital economy, and the affluent who are fully digitally integrated via credit cards. The poor who are not integrated into the formal economy are the one who will have major impact, but the others, they are trying to converge it with the help of JAM and other apps. Now in the next page, they also talk about the launch of BEAM app. You know that BEAM 2 is also coming. From science and technology point of view, BEAM app may be asked. So please be careful about it and try to read about it carefully once. High possibility that you may get a question on BEAM app this time, right? So these are some of the points where you have to read and write about it in the exam from mains point of view. In prelims, factual information may be asked. And we also need to look at Aadhaar enabled payment system. This is very, very important. Whenever you might have read in newspapers about the BEAM app or digitalization, they talk about UPI, Aadhaar enabled payment system, and they also talk about BEAM app, point of sale. These terms are very, very important from prelims point of view, right? In mains, if you write these words, high possibility that you get more marks. Let's move on. The next important thing in this chapter is in the last page, where they talk about the 5-pronged strategy could be adopted to prevent black money accumulation, where I have already told in the first chapter. This is in detail. You can use this 100 to 125 words in your answers, right? What measures are required by the government to ensure that black money accumulation stops? The GDP calculation is given in this book after demonetization. They talk about what are the things that we need to consider, but as we have seen that the GDP has performed fairly well, and by the time exam comes, you get to know about the factual information of the next quarter as well. So no need to struggle to read these pages in economic survey. So let's move on to the next chapter. So the next chapter is actually about the twin balance sheet problem which India is facing. I told you one is with respect to the corporate debt, the other one is with respect to the banking NPAs issue. So here in this chapter, it tries to go in detail and start explaining that whatever is done till now, nothing is beneficial when we look at the NPAs issue, and also the corporate debt is not coming out. So for that, we need to take several measures. We need to take some strong measures like going for write-offs of certain loans. We need to accept that there was a loss. Then only we can move further. And they say that the organizations which are formed till now was not beneficial. So they talk about the new agency which has to be brought in so that this can actually benefit us in solving these problems. So 2 pages are important here. I'll be showing those 2. Apart from that, nothing else is required. So let's see the first one in page 85, where they are talking about the public sector asset rehabilitation agency. So they say that if this agency can come up, then it will be beneficial for us to face the problems of the NPAs and other things. Last time the economic survey focused on 4 R's, which is successful but not up to the mark. So they are talking about the new agency that is there. As it is just a recommendation given by the economic survey, if this agency comes up, please try to look at this particular paragraph once. If this agency is not institutionalized, then this is not required for us, right? Then in page 94, they actually talk about what needs to be done to address this problem. In the next page, that is page 95, they actually talk about loss recognition. They say that we should recognize that loss has occurred. Then only we can move on. Else it is very difficult. The second important thing is the coordination problem. The RBI has called all the banks, but different banks have given different amounts of loans. So what is happening? The banks which has given less loans, they are ready for write-offs. But the banks which have given more loans, they are not ready for write-offs. So this is creating another problem. The third important thing is proper incentives. By just writing off, the banks are not going to get anything. So they are waiting for, or they are postponing the things so that at least they may get some money back. So this is not allowing the problem to be resolved quickly. Then we need to talk about the capital, where the government had promised to infuse money, but it is taking time. So more money has to flow into the banks. Yes, government has given money, but that is not sufficient. So that is what they are actually talking here with respect to solving the NPA's problem in the banks. And then we have to look at the appendix, where they actually talk about the measures taken by the government till now to solve this NPA's issue. So in this page, they actually talk about the 5/25 refinancing of infrastructure scheme, private asset reconstruction companies, strategic debt restructuring, asset quality review, and sustainable structuring of stressed assets. These were the measures taken by the government to reduce the NPAs. So please go through this. You would have read this in economy. That is the reason I am not going through this. Anyone who is talking about the NPAs, when they talk about the government measures, they would have talked about this. This is very, very important from mains and prelims point of view. So please go through this carefully once. So next, let's move to the next smallest chapter and the most easiest chapter. In this chapter, they are talking about the fiscal framework of the country, which is on track. So there you need to talk about the primary deficit once. You can see definition of all the deficits. Primary deficit is one issue which is stressed in this. If you can look at that, it is more than enough. And apart from this, the economic survey also talks about the two types of fiscal policy, that is pro-cyclical and counter-cyclical fiscal policy, where they say that whenever there is boom, we see that spending will be more and taxes will be less. When we say counter-cyclical, we say that whenever boom is there, spending will be reduced and taxes will be increased. India follows this counter-cyclical fiscal policy, is what this book actually discusses. So, alternatively, whenever there is recession, spending will be more to create demand and taxes will be reduced. So this is what India is doing now. This is the concept where they are focusing about this, and they are also talking that FRBM, fiscal responsibility, they are talking about FRBM, fiscal responsibility and budget management. It was introduced long back, there is a huge gap, and now we have to fill this as soon as possible. That is, a new policy has to come up, and in the new policy, the focus has to be with respect to the present trend. So India has tried to reach the targets which it had set for itself in these fiscal years, is what the chapter wants to focus. So nothing much to read in this chapter. Let's move quickly to the next chapter. So the next chapter is about the fiscal rules from the state's point of view. They say that yes, the states have also maintained whatever targets were given to them, and because of this it was possible for the country also to maintain the FRBM targets or to achieve the FRBM targets. So here some things they say is with respect to fiscal responsibility legislation, FRL, which was there, and it is believed that states followed the fiscal responsibility mainly because of the FRLs. But the economic survey says that apart from FRLs, there were some other benefits for the states also. And they say in the coming years, there may be some problem with the fiscal deficit of the states because of the Uday bonds and pay commission recommendations, slowing growth and rising payments. All these may actually lead to more spending from the states, which may increase their fiscal deficit. So this is the overall argument of the chapter. I'll show you some points which are required for us from prelims and mains point of view. So in the next page, actually the economic survey focuses on FRL doesn't mean the FRLs were responsible for this progress, but along with this, there were other things as well. What are they? One, GDP growth was more. Nominal GDP growth was almost above 6%. So because of that, states also benefited. Then increased transfer from the center to the states from the 13th Finance Commission. Then reduced interest payments of about 0.9% of the GSDP because of the debt restructuring package offered by the center. And then they also talk about reduced need for spending by the states, estimated at about 1.2% of the GDP. That is, lot of social sector schemes which the states had to usually fund. Now it has been reduced and the center is directly funding these schemes. Because of this, there is at least 1.2% of money the states which they used to spend has reduced now. Because of all these factors, we see that states were in a position to maintain the fiscal targets which were given to them, right? After this, what is more important is, I talked to you with respect to the issues. You need to look at Uday scheme, where the power sector problems are taken by the states themselves. After the pay commission at the central government, states are also forced to increase the hike. This will actually create more trouble, and the GDP, if it reduces, then it will have impact on the states. So all this may trouble FRBM as well. So this is what they are actually focusing in this, right? So these points, if we can notice carefully, it is more than enough. This particular thing, it can come in prelims where they may ask you these 4 points and tell which of the following statements are correct. So please be careful, try to read these 4 points carefully before prelims once, right? So the next chapter that is important for us is with respect to clothes and shoes, where they are talking about the jobs within the country. So if we need to improve jobs or increase jobs, then we need to focus on textiles and apparel industry. There they talk about some of the problems faced by Indian textile industries. China was the major contributor. Now, because of high cost of labor in China, it is reducing in China. So India has to fill this space. But unfortunately, Vietnam, Bangladesh, and even Kenya to some extent is trying to take this up. So India has to compete effectively to ensure that the space left by the China is taken by India. So let us look at some of the facts that are given about these sectors in the economic survey. So here they actually talk about the 4 countries: Bangladesh, Vietnam, Myanmar, and even Ethiopia. In page 130, they actually tell you which are the countries which are actually competing with India in terms of this, right? So this is very, very important for us, because as Bangladesh and Vietnam has more comparative advantage when compared to India, it is very important for India to reduce the taxes internally. Once we reduce the taxes internally, then India will also have competitive advantage in the apparel sector. So this is what this actually focuses on, right? So here we need to know about the problems Indian sectors are facing with respect to other least developed countries. In the next page, they actually talk about the contributions by different countries, and you can see that India is already at last. We need to pick up as soon as possible. Then this actually talks about the challenges which are present. One is about the logistics, where they say that bigger ships cannot enter India and we have to send it through smaller ports to countries like Sri Lanka. From there it will be exported. So this is actually creating lot of problems, or cost wise also it is not competitive for India. So it is said that the 13th port, which is actually coming up in Tamil Nadu, will be helpful in solving this problem to some extent. And then we have to look at labor regulation laws in India, which are not in favor of the companies. So more informal laborers are actually present, and the labor laws, if they are not in tandem with the industries which are actually working in these areas, it will be very difficult for the industries to compete. Then they actually talk about the tax and tariff policies. Here they usually say that Indian tax policy is in such a way that if a product is in great demand in the world, that product is taxed more in India. Because of this, what is happening? Our product is becoming costly. So we are not in a position to compete. For those products where the demand is less outside, we have given incentives. So this tax structure needs to be changed, is what the economic survey argues. Then it also talks about the discrimination in export markets, where I spoke with respect to Bangladesh and Vietnam, the advantages they have when compared to India. So apart from this, in page 137, they also say that the low wage employees, if they get salary less than 20,000, 55% of their salary usually will be received by them, and the remaining will go for deductions like EPFO, Employee Pension Scheme, Labor Welfare Fund, EDLI and ESI. So actually they are not benefiting much from this. So the economic survey says that it should be made voluntary, or it should be clubbed together to ensure that the reduction is less and people enjoy the benefits of this. At that point of time, what will happen? There won't be much demand for increase in the salaries. So they will work happily because the effective money what they receive will be more. That will be considered as a hike by these people. So this is one thing which we need to work whenever we are looking at the labor problems. So these are some of the issues which we need to see in this particular chapter. After this, the next chapter is actually about the Indian economy, where they talk about what all has happened, how exactly India has to work. Some statistical information is given and analysis of that will be done. You are aware that earlier economic survey used to come in 2 volumes. So here till now whatever covered is first volume, and then we will be taking up the second volume in the next class. Right? Thank you guys, thanks for watching. If there is any feedback, please let us know. If you need anything extra in the economic survey as well, if you have any doubts as well, please feel comfortable to ask. Thank you, thanks for watching.